The argument says fish with teeth specialized for scraping algae occur in both Flower Lake and Blue Lake. Okay, so apparently there are fish that have teeth for scraping algae, and they're in both of these lakes. Cool. Some biologists argue that because such specialized characteristics are rare, fish species that have them should be expected to be closely related. Okay? So if it's a rare trait, so if someone has it, they're probably related. According to these biologists, what does the author think? We don't know. This is just some biologists think this, right? So the author could disagree with this. If they are closely related, says the author, then algae scraping specialization evolved only once.
So that's the if-then statement.
Yeah, that's an if-then statement. Yeah, so if they are closely related, then they evolved only once. One. I don't know why that would be true.
It's just scientific fact, Ben. I don't have to tell you.
Okay, thank you. But genetic tests show that the two algae scraping species, although possibly related, are not closely related. Oh, they're not closely related.
Oh, I see what they did.
Yeah, okay, let's see what they say. Thus, the algae scraping specially evolved more than once. Therefore, not one.
So they.
So here's our premise, and then here's our conclusion, right?
Yeah.
That's what they said. What's this called right here? You remember that clause?
Oh, the sufficient condition.
That's the sufficient condition. Excellent. Okay? And that right there,
Necessary.
that's the necessary condition. Do you remember why it's called the necessary condition?
It's required to happen. Sufficient condition.
If the first one happens, then why is the sufficient condition called the sufficient condition?
Because it's enough to make the necessary condition happen.
That's right. It's enough. We don't need to know anything else. All we need to know is that they were closely related. And then bam.
But the fact that the problem is that the fact that they're not closely related doesn't mean they didn't evolve once. It's just sufficient.
That's right. That's right. So the absence of something that's sufficient doesn't prevent the other thing from happening, but the absence of something that's necessary would prevent something
So
from happening.
if it said they didn't evolve once, and so we know that they're
Not closely related.
but that's not correct.
Yeah. So when they went from here to here, what were they assuming? To say, oh, they're not closely related, therefore they did not evolve once, or they evolved more than once?
Were they saying that not evolving once is sufficient?
No, actually they're saying that not being
Not
closely
being
related.
closely related is
They basically thought this, right? This is the guy who's making the argument, and this is what this person is thinking. Right? They said, this guy right here, this idiot, said this, and then he concluded that, right? So he was thinking that this led to that. And does this relate to this at all? I mean, I guess it's related, but it's not necessary. It's not what?
It's not sufficient.
It's not a contrapositive, right? Which would be
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that must be true given the original if-then
Yeah.
statement. So if this is true, this is not necessarily true, so this is flawed. So what this person did is they treated something that is in fact a sufficient condition as if it were necessary. Because if you negate a necessary condition, then you can negate the sufficient condition.
But they negated the sufficient condition. And
Yes.
Called it a necessary.
And then thought that that would be good enough. So, answer choice, let's see here. I mean, given the fact that we saw a false contrapositive, we can just start looking for answers that talk about necessary and sufficient. Answer choice C takes a sufficient condition as a necessary one. That's exactly what it did. It treated a sufficient condition as if it were necessary. How do you guys feel about that? Good?
I thought you just said it tries to make it a sufficient condition.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what's going on here is that to go from here to here, you have to be thinking this, right?
Right.
But what does this, how do I describe this? Okay. This and this are not the same, right?
I think I see what you mean. Like if it's necessary to negate it, then you can go backwards.
Yeah. What's the contrapositive of this? I'll bring it up here.
Of his thought.
His thought, yeah.
If it's 1, then they're closer related.
Yes, this is the contrapositive. So these two things are equal, right? So if this guy, if this idiot is thinking this, then he also must be thinking that.
Right.
Now, if this was the original if-then statement, then going from here to here would be legit, because what you'd be doing is you'd be taking a necessary condition and you'd be negating it. And you can do that because negating a necessary means that you can negate this.
So that would be taking it necessary and making it sufficient.
Well, yeah, so what was in fact a sufficient condition in the original argument, this guy treated it as if it were over here.
Right, okay, I got that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's sufficient and necessary in action. Questions? Yeah.
Would you recommend diagramming it out like this anytime you see it, or
No.
you can just kind of come to that?
I want us to get to the point where we're just kind of like, oh, I can see this is A going to B, and this guy is saying not A, and that's useless. Or what's the other thing the person could say? If the original argument says if A then B, and then the person says, oh, B. Yeah, if they say B, therefore A, that's another confusing sufficient and necessary, right? Because if you say A goes to B, that does not mean that B goes to A, but if that's what they essentially end up saying, then they're confusing necessary and sufficient. I mean, you don't really necessarily have to know all that's going on. You just have to recognize that there's a false contrapositive. And if there's a false contrapositive in their reasoning, like they flip the argument, or they flip the if-then statement, or they negate both sides, but they don't do both, right? If you flip and negate, you're good. But if you just flip or you just negate, that's a problem. If you recognize that there's a false contrapositive, then you want to go look for the answer that talks about confusing necessary and sufficient. That said, if you don't see a false contrapositive, the confusing necessary and sufficient answer choice is often a wrong answer. They like to put that in there all the time. So, okay, cool.